Hi, I'm Skinny Cheeks. Today I'll be going through and giving some feedback on the changes that were proposed in the Update 41 PTS patch notes to the Sorcerer class. I've already done a few videos now going through the patch notes, one for Nightblades, one for Arcanists, and the status effect changes, and then I have the full patch notes VOD up on Twitch. I'll have all of those linked below for those interested. But let's go ahead and hop right into the Sorcerer changes. The first is to the ability Encase. This ability and its morphs now apply major Maim to enemies for 10 seconds, in addition to attempting to immobilize them for 4 seconds, rather than only immobilizing enemies for 4 seconds and refunding magicka if it failed to do so. Reduce the base cost to 40.50, down from 43.20. Note, the major Maim does not require the target to be immobilized to apply. So essentially they're adding in an AoE major Maim into the Sorcerer's kit. This is a pretty nice debuff to have, as the AoE version of it is not nearly as common. Single target major Maim is super easy to apply, but you don't see the AoE version on nearly as many things. So Sorcs now have that on-demand 10-second version of it. All the more reason they need to overhaul the Templar's Nova. Get rid of that Maim and let's get something interesting for damage on there. Anyways, this is a Sorc video. Sorry, just wanted you Templars to feel included too. So for the morphs of Encase, these have both been renamed. Restraining Prison is renamed to Vibrant Shroud. This ability now heals allies in the area with the same healing potency of Blessing of Protection, rather than attempting to immobilize enemies. This morph will continue to apply major Maim to enemies in the area for 10 seconds and will also apply minor Vitality to allies who were healed by the ability for 10 seconds. Increase the cost to 48.60, up from 40.50. So this seems like a pretty cool skill and could be worked in tandem with Combat Prayer to provide a pretty wide array of buffs and debuffs. It is rather expensive though, so that's something to consider, but having a nice heal on it, you get major Maim on the enemies and you also get minor Vitality on your allies. Pretty cool change here. So the other morph is Shattering Prison, renamed this morph to Shattering Spines to avoid confusion with the Rune Prison naming convention. So this morph's damage now happens after its own distinct effect timer ends, not completes, rather than when the immobilize ends. This will allow the damage to apply to targets that were immune to the immobilize effect, and will also allow the ability to deal damage every time when cast. Increase the damage done of this morph by about 10% to make up for its delay. So essentially this one works out as a 4-second delayed burst. It's guaranteed damage that will go off after 4 seconds. I don't really see it being popular for PvE use, as the damage from it's only slightly higher than the tooltip for Whirling Blades and quite a bit lower than the tooltip for Crystal Fragments, so it doesn't seem to really fit in for AoE or single target. Not really enough payoff here to warrant casting it every 4 seconds. It does seem like it could be an interesting tool for PvP though, as sorcerers do have a bit of delayed damage already, so this could be combined with, say, Haunting Curse and a frag proc to all hit at the same time, and then if your Mage's Wrath is applied already, that could be just some nasty simultaneous burst damage to nuke somebody. So pretty cool changes overall with this skill. On-demand major Maim for both morphs, and one of them with a nice burst heal, the other with some delayed burst damage. Next up we have Conjured Ward. This ability and the Hardened Ward morph will now heal you for 15% of your max health or magicka, whichever is higher, if no pets were shielded by the abilities. So this will be part of an effort from Zoss to give a little extra something to non-pet sorcerers, and we'll see a little bit more of that here in a bit. Then the other morph, Regenerative Ward, this now heals you for 10% of your max health or magicka, regardless of if a pet was affected by the shield or not. So let's look at the developer comment. In efforts to aid lone wolf sorcerers, we're adding a conditional bonus on this ability that makes up for the power loss it receives when you don't have pets with you, while also trying to make up for some loss in not running their primary burst heal with the Summon Twilight. We're also improving Regenerative Ward's bonuses in hopes it gets more engagement by making the heal a guarantee, but with a reduction in healing so it doesn't overshadow Hardened Ward. So Hardened Ward will be the bigger shield and have a nice heal if you don't have pets. Regenerative Ward is a smaller shield and a smaller heal, but it works with pets. I'd say if you do have some active incoming heals from another source, Hardened is still probably the better option even for pet builds, since it is a bigger shield, even though you won't get that heal from it. Both of them seem pretty good though. I think these are just positive changes for the Sorcerer. Next up we have Daedric Minefield. They renamed this morph to Daedric Refuge. The mines the ability places are now wards that activate when you or an ally walk over them, granting them a damage shield for 6 seconds, rather than activating to deal damage and then immobilizing when an enemy walks over them. Allies cannot be affected by one of the wards more than once every 2 seconds to prevent situations where a singular ally could take multiple shields shields immediately. The shield uses the higher of your max magic or stamina and is capped at 43% of the target's max health. So the developer comment here says, we're adjusting this morph to be a completely new, unique functionality to help sorcerers function more in the support role and gain access to more non-pet related defense tools. We targeted this morph to rework as the engagement between the original morphs heavily favored Daedric Tomb, and this morph naturally allows for a higher target count where support abilities shine most in. So this is pretty cool, I think. The shields are a pretty decent size and you get 5 of them per cast, so I think this could be a pretty popular tool. Even for small groups or solo, they last for 15 seconds, so you could put them down and then just kind of kite over them as needed to keep replenishing your shield. So I think it's a pretty fun idea, and it leaves the other morph for damage if you like using that one there. Next up, we have Expert Summoner. This passive increases your max health by 10% while you have a summoned pet of any kind, up from 8% when you have a Daedric summoning ability active. This passive now also increases your max magicka and stamina by 10% while you do not have a summoned pet of any kind. Developer comment here says, we're splitting this passive out to be more adaptive to the different build types we see sorcerer players engage with. Much feedback over the years has noted that playing the class without pets can often feel very limiting and less powerful overall, so we're attempting to add small bonuses for those lone wolf sorcerers out there. So I will say, I definitely think this is a step in the right direction. From a PvE DPS perspective, having pets is still quite a bit more damage. Fraktahl has already posted a parse over 143k for this PTS update using a stamina sorcerer with pets. I'll have that video linked below. Make sure to check it out for the full rotation and setup that's being used there. But as we are used to seeing with sorcerers, they still seem to have the highest potential for single target damage on the trial dummy, and a lot of that's due to the really high opening burst they can get with their overload skill. But the sorcerer's Atronach ultimate is pretty amazing and really great for group utility as well, so it's nice to bring a sorcerer along on the team. For the non-Pet Sorc, Kortekk and I were messing around with some setups, and he managed to hit 130k DPS with no pets. Really, this is not bad at all, and it was more than I expected. It's quite a bit up from what we've seen in previous patches. That extra 10% magicka and stamina definitely helped to narrow the gap a bit, but it's still a pretty wide gap overall. And the skill choice and rotation used for the non-pet setup is much more complicated and involved than the pet version, only to be nearly 10% behind still. So I think it's a step in the right direction for sure, but they could nudge it a little bit further. One drawback to boosting stamina and magicka is this doesn't affect procs like weapon and spell damage or percent boosts do. So a lot of our damage ends up unaffected by this buff. Another issue is that if you want to use that Atronach ultimate, every time you drop it, you lose your stat bonus for a little bit. So kind of a weird negative interaction there when using the ult, even though it is your best option for an ultimate and you still want to use it as a non-Pet Sorc. So I think having a little bit more added on there, maybe a bonus to weapon and spell damage or even a small percent boost or something, could help even that out just a little bit more. But I think the 10% boost here is definitely a good start. I also did a non-Pet Sorc parse with a bit more simplified bar setup. I just double barred Camo Hunter and only had 8 active abilities, and I still got really good results with that too, nearly 127k DPS, so only about 3k shy of what the more advanced setup that Kortekk used got, and much easier to maintain. But even this was slightly more involved than what you do with the Pet Sorc rotation, and it's even further behind. So it would be nice to see that gap closed a little bit more. One nice thing about this setup though is it does give you a little bit of wiggle room for some survival skills if you need. So overall, I really like what's going on here with this. I love the idea of the sorcerer with no pets. They just have a really fun magic style to their kit. Unfortunately, I think the gap is still a little too wide to justify dropping the pets for the harder content in the game. Next up, we have Lightning Splash. Increase the radius size of this ability and its morphs by an additional 2 meters, as they were significantly smaller than other class-based area of effect damage over time abilities with no real power justification for doing so. So that brought the base morph and Liquid Lightning up to 6 meters, so not too bad there. And then the Lightning Flood morph is now 8 meters, which is actually pretty massive. This is a pretty good skill when you factor in the synergy damage. Unfortunately, it doesn't really feel great to run on a sorcerer because your personal DPS is usually lowered by running it. The damage from the skill is just pretty underwhelming compared to a lot of other AoE dots out there. But when you factor in someone hitting that synergy every time you cast it, it does actually jump way way up on the list. It is a skill that is worth running. I just wish it did a little more for the person using it. Most of the other classes AoEs feel a bit better to run, even group utility cast aside, so I think it'd be nice to see a little bit more synergy with this skill with the rest of the Sorcerer kit to make it a bit more appealing, as that lightning theme is a big core part of the Sorcerer, but lightning stuff just doesn't often make its way onto their skill bars. Pets are definitely a part of that limitation with them requiring both bars, but even throwing that out, the non-Pet Sorc parses I've been seeing still haven't been slotting lightning flood. So it is nice that the AoE is bigger, but I'd still like to see a bit more power out of this one. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know what you all think about the Sorcerer changes. I'll keep these videos coming out till we've covered all the important changes coming on the PTS. Hopefully doing the videos in this way will allow me to be a bit more thorough while also still having the information come out in more manageable chunks. Big shout out to my current Patreon supporters and YouTube members. The contributions help a ton to keep the website and YouTube channel going. And a special thanks to Nicholas, Simon, Cougars Bay and the Cougar City Guild, the Order of War Guild, Cantankerous Cat, Shady, Iffy, Blake1816, Mordecai 1212, Santanico, Vidridi, Florian, Phoenix, Nalandia, Unemployed, Chryseliana, Cha-Cha, Technical KO, Cap, Danco77, and Pletpron. Thanks again and see you later. Bye.